Hello, everybody. Josh Brown here, back for another great episode on Franchise Euphoria. Well, today's episode is brought to you by IndieFranchiseLaw.com, a leading resource in the franchise space to help you if you're considering buying a franchise, turning your business into a franchise, or growing your business through a licensing or franchise structure. So go on, check it out, IndieFranchiseLaw.com. I think you'll find a lot of valuable and free information as you continue to kind of weigh franchising and licensing and the growth of your business. Without further ado, I hope you enjoy today's episode. Today, I'm thrilled to have on Christy Wilson Delk of Christy Wilson Delk Enterprises, LLC. She's a speaker, author, educator, all in the realm of franchising. She has a tremendous amount of experience and a great background to come onto Franchise Euphoria today. She literally years and years ago risked it all to go become a franchisee and became an extremely successful franchisee for a franchise system that she talks about today, and then went on to become a college professor and franchise industry expert and author, where she wrote the book Adventures in Franchise Ownership and really focuses on a 4 pillars approach that she talks about to help people who are in the franchise industry and to help franchisors and franchisees alike work together for the benefit of both sides. Really enjoyed this interview with Christy Wilson Delk and think that you will as well. Hello, Christy. Welcome to Franchise Euphoria. How you doing?
Doing great, Josh. Thank you very much.
Well, I'm excited to have you on for a number of reasons. I mean, your background is tremendous in franchising. I mean, you've been there, you've laid it on the line to be part of a franchise system. You're a college professor and a franchise industry expert where you teach about these things. You're an author with a great franchise book. And so you have a lot of experience and thoughts. And that I think is really important right now, especially everything that not just the franchise world, but everybody's going through right now with COVID-19. But before we jump into all of that, as we just started with this interview, introduce yourself a little bit. Give us sort of the franchise background that you have.
So I found my way to franchising in my early 30s, and probably a lot like most people, I'd had a couple of career downs, a layoff in an industry that basically went away. I think I got fired at least once, didn't color inside the lines or something. Um,
Well,
but
if you haven't been fired at least once, you just haven't lived long enough.
amen.
Okay.
Amen to that. So at some point, I had a neighbor, a lot of times it's a family member, but I had a neighbor who kept talking to me about, hey, Christy, you really ought to look at this. I think you'd be a great owner. It happened to be an early childhood development franchise, and ended up that I did decide to go with that franchise. It's a Kids Are Kids. It was and they are still doing great. Kids Are Kids Academy out of Duluth, Georgia. But, it took a couple of punches for me to get serious about doing it. But then when I decided I was going to do this, little did I know that I was probably jumping into one of the not more challenging segments, because I think they're all wonderfully challenging in their own way. But from a financial perspective and from a, sort of true grit and sweat equity perspective, it was a toughie because I had to sell my house to get the equity. I cashed out my 401k, to get the down payment for the, I don't know, million. You don't forget these numbers. They're like your kids' birthdays. $1.67 million SBA loan. So then built it and ran it, expanded it a couple of times, had many, many, stories come out of that. That's the, hence the title of the book, Adventures in Franchise Ownership. But just lots of experiences, good, bad, ugly. And I loved it. I loved every minute of it. And I did it. I was an owner for 15 years. I was super engaged. I had and still have a fantastic relationship with the franchisor. And when I sold, there probably could have been a better time, but it was a good time. It was a good time personally. It was a good time industry wise, and it was a good time to sell a nice piece of real estate. So I sold, gosh, 7 years ago, something like that. And then started this college professor gig, which is really fun. But, we can talk about that later if you want to. But it was a wonderful experience.
No, I mean, it's great, and so many of the people who listen to this show and beyond, are thinking about, contemplating, have thought about putting it on the line, taking out, cashing in their stocks, their 401k, converting them in to rollovers. I mean, doing whatever they can to take part in the franchise dream that they have, or the dream that they've had to own a business, to start a business, to run a business. You've obviously done that and it worked out very well for you, which is great. And you did it for a long period of time, 15 years. Well, I mean, what would you tell those folks out there who are at that stage where, they've probably thought about it a handful of times, or maybe they've thought about it for a handful of years, and they really just haven't pulled the trigger? I mean, what do you think in with your story made the experience so good? I mean, was it that you just had a great franchisor, or I got to think that over a 15-year period, there were things as you look back that you could say, "Wow, this is what really I think helped make this whole thing so successful."
For those that are listening who are, pretty seriously considering, I think one thing is true is that, boy, the whole industry really has so many resources to help you figure out what is the best fit to help you be successful. I don't think there are too many, secrets out there right now that you're going to uncover something and it's not going to be a healthy choice to go into franchising. I think the sooner that you do it, the better. I have a family member who's considering franchising right now, and he's my brother-in-law. I don't know if he's listening or not, maybe. And the one thing I think is, wow, I wish you had done that 10 years ago when I really thought it was a perfect time for you. It's always going to be a good time, but the sooner that you get into it, the better. You can start building wealth. You gain experiences that make you a more confident business person. Your community will give you respect and loyalty, hopefully, if you, do things right, and you will. And franchisors are really there to help you. You're not going in it on your own. That's one thing. The other little piece of advice that I didn't realize, let me put it this way. The thing that made mine so challenging was the fact that it was one of those big dollar investments, buying the land, building the building, etc. However, when it came time to sell, that risk, that investment is part of what paid off so well. So a lot of times people will
You're glad you
buy.
bought the land, right? I'm
Yeah,
assuming.
yeah,
Yeah.
it was really, really hard, but it really, really paid off. However, some of the smaller, investments lead to positive outcomes in other ways. You can do an area investment when you're ready for more. You can buy a second brand. There's so many ways to grow. But I say I don't think there's any better way to get into business ownership. And there's nothing that feels better than business ownership. If you've got 10 or 15 or 20 or 30 years ahead of you, to earn wealth.
I mean, did you have any kind of background in the franchise business you went into before you went into it?
No, nothing specific. However, when you've been in a corporate environment or maybe even not maybe, even a small business environment, if you've had good mentors and you've been involved in healthy businesses, you learn so much more by observing and doing than you realize. So in the book, I interview many, many, many different top performers. Franchisors introduced me to some of their top performers, and a whole bunch of them didn't have a college degree. So that is certainly not a prerequisite. Um, as far as being in early childhood education, no formal education. However, my BA was in psychology. So that's liberal arts and that's, studying people. So that in that regard, that was a good fit. And then the HR part of managing 50 plus people, that became, a real important part of being successful, in my opinion. However, by being an employee for so long, I was on the other side of what corporate HR people do, what works, what doesn't work, what motivated me, those kinds of things. So, and then the franchisor, provides you with the tools to, you know, give you exactly what you need to run your business in a specific segment. So they had curriculum, they had training, they had quality assurance, all those important things. So the answer is yes and no, but there's one other part of the answer that's important, and that is you do have to have some level of passion or concern or respect for the clients that you're serving. So I, as a working mom, my son was young, but, believe me, and you have 3 children, it's a hard gig, so I had tons of respect for the working clients and knew how hard it was, and I just in my heart, I love children. So, that segment's not for everybody, but,
Well, that's a huge point. I mean, that's a really interesting point, and it's good because at the end of the day, a lot of times what I find with prospective franchisees or people who are considering franchises is just like anybody who's looking to buy a business. They want to do their due diligence. They want to feel as good about the purchase as possible, and yet at the same time, they want to feel as good about the franchisor because this is it's a trust. It's really like a partnership. So you have to feel good about that. But at the end of the day, no matter what the situation is, there's going to be challenging times. There's going to be um, times in which you might have a difference of opinion with your franchisor. But I think what you're talking about, this sort of underlying um, passion or drive for the end consumer that is helping your business, I think really helps to probably get you through those times a little bit and figure out ways to make it work.
Yeah, it does, and it's really easy as the owner to get caught up in the numbers and the metrics and the certifications and all that. And it can bring you down. But for me, a walk around the center, sit with the children, or have a really, meaningful conversation with a mom or a dad or a new mom or new dad, that was it. Okay, it came right back. So, yeah, there has to be an underlying, we can use the P word, passion or, respect for that client that you're serving for sure.
Yeah, there needs to
Um,
be a balance. I mean, obviously, what I'm always telling people, and I think is you'd like to have all the you'd like to have the passion, but you certainly don't want the passion to be a substitute for the business judgment either. So you want to have a good balance of, yes, you might.
Absolutely.
Right. I mean, you've got a passion for this, but that doesn't always mean it's a great business investment. I use the analogy, but because it's happened several times with people who have called me, where they'll call and I'm interested in this particular franchise, and I'll say why. If it's like a
Yeah.
restaurant or something, and that's my first question, why, and so often the first answer is, well, I love going there. I go, okay, well, that's great. That's a good
Yeah.
start. But do you know anything about how they make money, what their food costs are, what goes on behind the scenes? And oftentimes the answer is no. And so there needs to be a further investigation. But certain people just follow that passion blindly, don't take the business acumen with it, and that's a recipe, I think, for a bad scenario.
I agree. And in fact, I had that conversation with that family member I was telling you about, which was similar to what you just described, but also you do realize that's 7 days a week. You do realize that's, just because you enjoy going there doesn't mean, and one of the reasons why this business attracted me was, guess what? Yeah, it's a long day, but it's closed on the weekends. And you know what? I like that.
Yeah.
So, but you know what? I forgot to add something, and this is not a shameless plug, I promise. But the other thing that helped me and gave me confidence for expansions and pulling the trigger and all of that was I made sure I had enough money and enough time to hire professionals to help me. And that included, a good CPA, that included an attorney to review the document, that included a proper engineer. And throughout my time during that 15 years, I had probably 3 different attorneys that I had on call, one employer, one crisis, and, just general.
Well, I think that's smart. I mean, you have to have the professionals. You've got to. I mean, I always tell people you need to have the right lawyer for legal advice. You need to have the right accountant. You need to have the right um, insurance people and
Yeah.
financial institutions. And then if you needed more people than that, because that's a good, well-rounded sort of, I think, at a baseline you need. But I also recommend always for franchise owners that they have a whether it's a coach, a business coach, some sort of strategic advisor. Maybe it's one of those
Mhm.
people I just named who
Mhm.
they're close enough with that they feel like they can just reach out, and bend their ear. Because I think that that's, especially as you're getting going with the franchise system, that's something that can be super beneficial. I mean, super
Mhm.
beneficial.
Mhm.
Tell me this. Okay. You're a college professor. So, of course, you wrote a book, right? You've got, um, so Adventures in Franchise Ownership. And I love that you went around and got advice from people in a lot of different segments. And I like that because I think it gives a very well-rounded perspective on that. Tell us a little bit about that book and the reasoning behind doing it.
So, after I sold and started attending conferences, franchise conferences, and teaching, I realized that, wow, the 15-year part was a little unique. It's a little longer than the tenure, the average tenure. Some of the things that I did were also a bit unique. And I really decided, I don't know, after a couple years that, you know what? I had a lot of great stories. They were adventures, yes, but I was telling them in class and I was just realizing, this is a book. I think in order to really be able to get a positive message out for franchisees and thereby hopefully helping franchisors, I need to put this together. And my story really started after I'd been open a couple of years and had gone through at least one hurricane and a personal a divorce, a valley. And I realized, this business, not just this business, but any business is going to go through all kinds of cycles. And I picked up a book. I'm a big fan of reading business books and pleasure books, but called Peaks and Valleys by Spencer Johnson, MD. He's written a bunch of great books. And anyway, it just had a huge impact on the way I started viewing my business, Josh. And I realized that the most important thing that I could do was to focus on the things that I could control. And in the academic world, believe it or not, there's a term for that now. I did not know, but it's called effectual entrepreneurship. And so effectual
I've never
entrepreneurs or
heard of that.
French.
Yeah.
I know. I know.
Okay.
I hadn't either. It's the professors are out of Tennessee. It's a great textbook that I use, but the premise is that a lot of these folks that, we admire from afar, these really well-known business founders and innovators really just focused on what they could control. And so as a franchisee, I realized I can't control the economy. I can't control a whole bunch of stuff. I can't control the weather, that's for sure. And we can't control coronavirus either, but we can control certain things. So I started focusing on what I could control. And that started changing everything. For one thing, it freed me up to really focus on my business in the right way instead of worrying about certain things. And it allowed me to get more serious about building loyalty, which is one of the pillars of the book. Building layers of loyalty within your client base, of course, your community, with your staff, as well as with your franchisor. That is really important, guys. Loyalty that you build with your franchisor pays huge dividends. So that started happening. And then I got serious about leading. Strategic leadership is a pillar. And inside of that is trying to control what you can about the competition, trying to control what you can when bad things happen. like we're experiencing now. So that, and then it led into money and planning and executing. And then finally, how do you repeat that, you know?
I mean, it's like a roadmap for franchisees who are now in a system to help them on that journey, which I don't think there's a franchise related book out there that's like that, as far as I know.
Thank you for saying that because if there is, I haven't found it and I looked. And that was one reason why I wrote it. I thought, oh my goodness, there's not a, we can call it a handbook if we want to, for it does not, it totally aligns with franchisor processes. This complements, enhances, gives structure to, roadmap is a great way to put it.
Well, and I think so many people, as they're going through their franchise journey, I mean, they learn from the experiences of others who are, in the franchise system, other franchisees, people who had been a part of it. But then
Mhm.
also other people who have been a part of other franchise businesses, because even if it's not the same exact franchise, there are similar things that you have to deal with, regardless of the actual franchise that you're operating.
Mhm. Amen to that, and I say in the book, and I write contributing articles for different magazines and stuff, I say, you can definitely look outside your franchise, and you can definitely even look outside your industry. If you notice something cool, we're all consumers, make a note, and there may be a way you can work that into your business that somebody that will become an extremely valuable employee or client might notice that one thing that you did. So, yeah, you have to get creative.
Well, and you mentioned some of these pillars, and I know you've got a four-pillar approach. What is that four-pillar approach, and how does it work?
So the four pillar approach, you said roadmap. I also would use the term framework. So it's really a framework for running a business. And it doesn't even have to be a franchised business, but for running a business and how to focus on all the different things that you need to focus on. So it gives you a framework. The one part that I mentioned, the pillar about building layers of loyalty, the four pillars approach will strengthen, protect, and grow your business. And those three things are the three things that will ensure longevity. So the first pillar about building loyalty, will help to strengthen your business. It's loyal clients and loyal employees and loyal community members that will help you during difficult times. And of course, we're looking at a lot of those difficult times right now. Then the second pillar is on strategic leadership, protecting your business. I'm looking at the title page right now. Communication being chapter 8, the ultimate differentiator. I have a cool story in there from a guy that owns, actually, he's up in your neck of the woods. I think 8 or 9 Anytime Fitness stores, and he has a whole system for how he communicates with his staff and his clients that's very different from the franchisor. But guess what? The franchisor put me in touch with them, and they're adapting and adopting a lot of the things that he does. But strategic leadership is about protecting your business, but it's also about conserving your leadership capital. You're just one person. You can't do everything every year for everybody. So you have to be strategic about it. And that means you got to get super focused and you have to make it count. And I have lots and lots of examples in the book and some worksheets too. So I hope I can give that little URL, no strings attached, so the listeners can go to the worksheets. But the third pillar is about money metrics to grow your business, putting a plan in place. Sometimes things happen like right now, and, we have to make adjustments, no doubt. But generally speaking, it's not just about knowing your metrics, but being able to project. And then once you get to that, I call it level 3 projection in terms of knowing your numbers. Then you can really become extremely proficient at guiding your business. And guess what? That creates more time and energy for you to give to your employees, your family, your relationships, the things that you didn't have time for a few years. So all these things make you better, a better business person and happier and, more fulfilled in your business. So, and then the fourth pillar is about focusing your business. And I call it method management, and we both know that's not a new term. You can call it whatever you want, but it's about how do I focus? So, repeat, how do I continue to build on what I'm doing this year? And so it's about revisiting the layers, revisiting that meeting, getting more and more efficient, and therefore hopefully, effective, accomplishing your goals. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. That was a little bit long. So
No, that was great. I mean, it's very thorough, which is fantastic because I think that there's stuff out there that's very surface level, and I can tell and know that yours is not surface level. And so it really dives in, which I think is very beneficial for franchisees who, by the way, they can go to Amazon, they can go to Barnes and Noble. I think they can go to something called Porchlight to get purchases to purchase the book Adventures in Franchise Ownership. Can they also go to your website, christywilsondelk.com?
yeah, they absolutely can. And that porch light is, for bulk. So if you're a
Okay.
multi-unit owner and you want to give it to your GMs or something. But yeah, and if they go to my website, I'm gonna have a button on there for Amazon and Barnes and Noble. But I want to make sure that I'll try not to be tedious, but what I did was I created worksheets that are in the book, but I wanted people, listeners really, to be able to just download the worksheets. You don't even have to give me your email. And that will guide you partially through the four pillars, but it'll give you some exercises and it'll certainly give you some good things to think about right now that I really do think will be helpful and give you some motivation and energy to, keep on keeping on. But it's if they go to Christy with a CHR, Christy Wilson Delk with a D, doesn't have to be capital, / listeners with an S, they'll go right to the four pillars worksheets.
That's fantastic. Thank
Good.
you.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Now, is it christywilsondelk.com/listeners, or is it just
It
Christy
is.
Wilson?
It is.
Okay, got
I
it. Okay.
forgot that.
No, it's okay. I just want to make sure. I think most
Yeah.
people know. So it's Christy with a CH, christywilsondelk.com / listeners for all sorts of good information. Of course, they can go to Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, and put in your name as well. Before we end, you've talked about it a little bit and mentioned obviously the times we're going through right now, with COVID-19, the coronavirus, the uncertainty, the fear, the unknown. And we're obviously in a position now where literally right now the economy has been forced closed. I mean, we don't have businesses that are operating outside of the essential businesses. We've got the grocery stores, we got restaurants doing carry out. It's a pause until we figure out how to get through this health crisis. But at some point in time, we will get through this and we will move forward. With all your years of experience, what kind of advice would you leave with people who are in the middle of owning a franchise right now, looking at possibly taking advantage of opportunities to purchase a franchise once this health crisis settles a bit? I mean, what sorts of advice would you give for this unknown period that we all find ourselves in?
Yeah. Thank you for asking that question. I really want to encourage listen, and I've given this a lot of thought. So, this is from the heart and all those other places that Josh mentioned where I've had experiences, ups and downs, and all of that. But I've given it a ton of thought. And first of all, substitute the C word, corona, for control and think about the things that you can control. I came up with a list of four C's, all of which are all throughout the book. But the first one is cash. I mean, right now, there's no doubt that is the big thing that's on everyone's mind. So I think if I was a franchisee right now, the thing I'd be focusing on now, because obviously I've been communicating and making some plans, is getting your hands on the cash that's becoming available through the CARES Act, through the payroll protection exemptions. Go to your relationship bank. And I heard the Bank of America CEO this morning say, this is where you have your loans. Go to the bank where you have your loans, not even necessarily where you have your account. That bank, your relationship bank, and start working on getting this money because it's going to take a little bit of time, but get your hands on as much cash as you can. And for others, and I promise the rest is not scary like this, but I wanted to say this part first. Think about the equity in your house. Think about the other things. We will get through this, and you want to be standing tall when we do. So get your hands on your cash. Number two, moving on, communication. um, Different ways, obviously, to communicate. Your job right now is to communicate with, your best employees, your best clients, your best community partners in the way that reaches them. So you might have to get a little bit creative there. You want to let them know what you're doing. You want to let them know that you're staying positive. You want to let them know, what your plans are. But different ways that you can communicate with those key people. And in the book, I talk about your sweet spots. I'm not going to go there now, but those are your most valuable employees and clients. You need to be thinking about them and communicating with them right now. Third, creativity. And last is competition. So, creativity, this is a time where you can start to think a little more creatively about your business. We're starting to see it, we are seeing it. And I suggest thinking about maybe your rewards program, or if you don't have one, thinking about putting together something like, the first time you come back, we're going to do this and that. Or, I have lots of ideas, but only a little bit amount of time. But think creatively and try to focus at least one creative aspect on your key, targets that you can do, and you make it count. Remember, strategic leadership means you got to make it count. It's people have to take notice. Um, and then last is competition. Think about what your competitors aren't doing and make sure you are doing something meaningful for your clients right now. It may be a handwritten note, it might be, a gift card when they come back. There's a lot of things you can do that are going to put you ahead of the competition. And I like to talk about true competitive advantage. That's a little bit more strategic, but, you don't have to do everything yourself. You've got people that'll help you. But think about your competition and how you want to stand out from them, differentiate yourself.
No, I love all that, and I mean, no, that's great advice. I mean, I think that all of us have been dealing with this now for several weeks, if not
Yeah.
longer, and so I very much agree with everything you said, and believe that we're now through the phase of assessing the situation, right? Like, we know what's going on, we know that it's gonna continue to go on. We just don't know in what time frame. But I think it behooves people to, while they still take great caution and care to make sure that they stay healthy and keep their family healthy, that they also prepare for um, take the time now and prepare for what's going to be coming of whatever this new normal or new reality is going to be. And one thing I can promise is that it's not just going to go back to how it always was. And so if you can
Mhm.
be thinking about your industry, because it's so industry specific,
Mhm.
what are things that you can be doing either different or better or more focused
Mhm.
going forward, and then start putting together those action steps right now. I think people who do that, I think businesses and franchise owners and franchisors alike, as they do that, they're going to see that they're going to be in a better position once everything does go back to whatever that normal
Mhm.
is, because now's a great time to just sort of reassess those things and figure things out, knowing that you're not, this is like the 100-year flood, right? I mean, I
Yeah.
don't think this is going to happen all the time, but we don't
Mhm.
know, number one. But number two, it's such a great opportunity to think about your business and say, when the unknown happens, whether it's this or something else, am I in a position to adapt quickly, and still maintain? And if you can be thinking about those things, I think that puts you in a better position than probably most people out there. Most people out there aren't doing that.
Absolutely. And I had to put a chapter in the book called What to Do When Bad Things Happen, dot, 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 because they will happen. The advice that I have in the book is very different than what I just shared because we're here now. But when we come out of it and you've done some strategic things to position you well, just like Josh said, then when you can take a breath, then let's reassess for in the event something else happens, be it an act of God or, terrorist attack. I mean, who knows?
All the stuff, right?
All
Yeah.
that stuff, but you
Well,
can prepare. Yeah.
and in the meantime, while everybody's at home, go buy Christy's book, Adventures in Franchise Ownership. Go download it through Audible. Go to Amazon, whatever it is, whatever you like and enjoy. And go to ChristyWilsonDelk.com, but that's Christy with a CH and /listeners, and download some great
Some
worksheets.
worksheets, yeah.
Thank you, Christy, for coming on. It's been really a joy and a
Thank
pleasure,
you.
and to just talk with you and learn from your wealth of experience.
Thank you. I have a big smile on my face because I really appreciate the opportunity to get some of that off my chest. And I love your podcast. You give such great advice, and the last couple of episodes were, to me, just really soothing and just the right tone for right now. So kudos.
Well, I appreciate that, and we'll definitely stay in touch.
Okay. Take care. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for tuning in for another episode of Franchise Euphoria. If you enjoyed this episode or have enjoyed the podcast in general, I would really appreciate it if you could go to iTunes and leave me a rating and review. It really helps to get this podcast out to more and more people. So the easy way to do it is go to iTunes and in the search box, put in Franchise Euphoria. You will then see my cover art, and you click on my smiling face that says Franchise Euphoria, and then click on the link that says ratings and reviews. It's that simple, but boy, oh boy, does it mean the world to me when people leave ratings and reviews. And like I said, it really helps get the show out there. Once again, would love it if you would go to iTunes and leave a rating and review if you enjoyed this episode or other episodes of the show. And until the next time, happy franchising.